Hi and welcome to today's episode, which we have a crack at some bread making and make a vegan and savoury take on a Chelsea bun. When I made the breakfast crinkle cake, I want to say last year, I was thinking it'd be really interesting to make a savoury Chelsea bun. A Chelsea bun is a similar thing to a cinnamon bun. It's a pastry that's kind of swirled bread. That's an awesome way of describing it. I'd been chatting to someone in the comments because they said, oh, I love breakfast. What else have you got? So I've mentioned this idea. And then I've kind of forgotten about it. The new series of the Great British Bake Off has started. Last week was Bread Week. I think the signature challenge was a filled stuffed roll, and somebody made a savoury Chelsea bun. And that reminded me that I'd had the idea. I've had a separate idea for a breakfast type thing. So I thought I'll save breakfast flavours for that and put something else in the savoury buns. So I've settled on doing kind of Mediterranean type flavours. I found a recipe for cinnamon buns on noracooks.com. I'll stick the link to that in the description. In my jug here, I've got 480 mils of oat milk, 2 cups. I'm going to warm it in the microwave. I'm going to do it in 30-second blasts. It can't be too hot because we're going to mix the yeast into this, and that will help activate the yeast a bit. And if it's too hot, it will kill the yeast off. Got 115 grams of vegan butter in a pan. That's half a cup. I'm gonna start melting this. The milk's warmed through. It's a comfortable bath. I'm gonna add 50 grams of white granulated sugar. That's 1/4 cup. The original says half a cup, so I've cut that in half just because I don't want something that sweet. I don't mind a bit of sweetness, but not that much. And then I'm gonna add 4.5 teaspoons of the yeast. You need instant yeast. So that's what this is. It's the equivalent of 2 sachets. So I'll whisk that in. And then we're going to leave that to go foamy. That's the butter all melted down. We need 4.5 cups or 560 grams of flour. I'm going to use this very strong Canadian white bread flour, so it's got a higher protein content. I've had this bag in a damp place without realising, so I definitely need the sieve. But I tested it earlier and it's fine. I'll keep the bag out because I might need to add more. And I'll do a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I'll work that in. Okay, so that's the flour sorted. I'm going to push a well in the middle and I'll pour the milk mixture into there, and I'll use my dough hook to make the dough. I want to say Danish dough hook, so you can hopefully see a big layer of foam on top. Pour the mixture in. Forgot to do the butter, didn't I? Ideally I would have mixed the vegan butter into the milk mixture before pouring all of that in. And then we'll start working it in. Now it says the dough will be sticky, but that does look very wet to me, so I might need some extra flour. So I'm going to do that amount of flour. That looks a bit better, doesn't it? Leave that in the bowl for a sec while I dust my counter. I might have to knead a bit more flour into it, but we'll see. Knead the dough 5 minutes or so. So I've just spread it out. Added more flour. Probably done an additional 1/2 cup. Okay. So I think that's the stage where I can start kneading. So kneading dough helps develop the strands of gluten, the protein, and that's what gives you the structure inside a loaf of bread. It's like the kind of strands almost. I'm just going to split this in half because my hands are a bit sore. It's easier to work on a smaller piece. Okay, so that's got a good amount of stretch to it. It says knead until it's a smooth dough, which I think this is. It's not shaggy or anything. So I'll work those back into each other. Okay, and then I'll drop it back into the bowl, and then covering it with a damp tea towel just so it doesn't dry out. I need to proof the dough now for 20 minutes. That's part of the reason why I went for this recipe, because it's a really short, quick recipe considering it's a bread. I'm going to put it in the oven. I warmed the oven to 50 degrees. Once it hit the 50, I've got an oven thermometer in there. I switched off the oven and cracked the door open a little bit, so it's now at 30-ish. You don't want it over 32 because that's going to kill off the yeast again. So I'm going to put it in for 20 minutes, keep an eye on it. I've assembled all of the filling bits and pieces, so I'll talk you through each as I'm prepping them. Just remembered the oven's got a light setting on it, so I'll just put that on because that'll add a little bit of warmth into the oven. The bits and pieces I've opted for, completely optional, use whatever you like. Got about 2 tablespoons of pine nuts, I've just toasted those off in the air fryer. Got 75 grams of walnut pieces, about 1/2 cup or so. So I'm going to break these down into smaller pieces. I will pull out any bits of skin that I come across. Just in case I didn't say it, the walnuts were also toasted in the air fryer. Got 3 spring onions. So I'm just going to take off the outer layers. I did think about doing caramelised onions, but I've run out of steam. So I've decided just to use spring onions. And it's a good job because the 20 minutes is up on the dough. So I'm now rather up against the clock because you can overprove bread, which you don't want to do. Now I'll just chop that down a little bit smaller. Got some pitted black olives. I'm going to take them out onto a piece of paper towel just to blot them. 17 to be precise. And then I'm just going to chop these down. Sundried tomatoes. You could also buy sun-dried tomato paste and just spread that over the dough as well. And again, just chop these down smaller. I'll do some of these sweetie drop peppers. These are very cute little things, equivalent of 3 tablespoons. Flavour on these, very sweet. There's a very mild heat. These ones here, I got a pack of vegan chorizo style sausages. So I've just cooked those off in the air fryer. Chop them a bit smaller. Got some fresh basil. So I'm just going to pick the leaves off, take the stems. So I'm going to stack them all inside each other. And then I'll fold the little stack in half. And then finally, slice. Yeah, so it's probably a tablespoon if you clumped it all together. And then last but not least, I've got some vegan feta. Feta typically comes in a liquid, so I just want to drain that. A bit of pat. I might go down like that. Oh, that's big. I've gone a bit too far, but such is life. Take this out the bowl. I'm going to punch it down. The only time punching down is acceptable. So we're just going to knock the air back out of it. Very lightly flour the worktop. Put a bit of flour on the rolling pin. And we need to get this into a rectangle. Yeah, I've got a feeling I've overproved the dough. It's full of air bubbles. Try and stretch this bit out. Okay, I think that'll do. I'm kind of sticking the edges to the worktop just to help maintain the shape a little bit. So kind of tacking it on. I'll do some cheese and I'm going to stay away from the very edges here as much as I can because I'll probably cut those bits off. It would probably be better to go slightly wider and slightly shorter. And we'll do some chorizo, spring onions, and the little peppery things. Tomatoes and olives. Okay, so it looks like I've actually done the perfect amount of filling, as long as this rolls up okay. I think it should, because the dough is very stretchy, whereas if you were doing this in pastry, for example, it wouldn't be as stretchy. And then lastly, a shredded basil. So that's got a lovely bounty of delicious bits on top. So what I'm going to try and do is roll it up. I don't think I've ever done anything like this before. Escapees in. Well, it's definitely thicker in places than it is others. But that's okay. I'm just going to roll it a little bit just to seal it together. Pull it back, kind of pinching the two edges together a little bit. Got a very definite bulge in the middle, like an anaconda just swallowed a capybara whole. Anyway, so I need to figure out how to cut this thing. I think I'm going to try and slice it in half and then I can get it up on the board. Okay, I'm going to use this Pyrex. The recipe doesn't say to oil it, but I'm going to oil it because I just don't want them getting stuck in there. I've done a very light wipe with some oil on a paper towel. I need to get 6 from each. Give it a bit of a shape if it needs it. I'm thinking maybe I should alternate them. You know, little big, little big. You want to cut it with a serrated blade, otherwise it's just going to compress it. There's the 2 doughless ends. I'll put them on the shelf below or something. So there's a little dish of delicious doughy delights. As I was assembling things, I was preheating the oven at 180 degrees C, 375 Fahrenheit. Recipe says in there 20 to 30 minutes until the middles are cooked through. Not really sure how you're supposed to check the middle of those things though. But we will see. Initially I was thinking I'd make some garlic and herb butter to drizzle over the top of it, But then I found this in the supermarket. So this is Flora plant-based smoked garlic butter, which frankly sounds amazing. So I might just melt a little bit of that down while we do the eating. I'll pour butter on just the ones I'm eating, you know, rather than doing the whole top, because I think that will impact storage a little bit. So I'll see you back in half an hour or so. Our delicious looking buns are all done. Had them in the oven for half an hour in the end. I've no idea if these are baked the whole way through. I rolled the little end bits into buns. It sounds kind of hollow, which is a good sign. All I can do really is lever one out of the pan and give it a go, and we'll see. Not sure how to do this. They do look to be separating pretty well, so that's a good sign. Okay. Oh, yes. That looks banging. Slice the bun open so you can get an idea of the texture of the bread. Oh, that looks great. Yes. That bit there, I think that is the feta, like a big melted piece of feta rather than uncooked dough. Once the buns had been in for 3 minutes, I suddenly realised, oh, I missed the pine nuts. I thought about chucking them on the top, but because I've toasted them, it would have just got way too much colour and they'd have gone really bitter. So that's a shame. Show the inside a little bit so you can see. It's very kind of gooey in places, but that's the feta and obviously the olives and tomato and pepper, etc. I melted down some of the smoked garlic butter. I'm going to try it without, just so I can get an idea of the flavour on its own. That's heavenly. It's got a bit of a pizza vibe to it because of the things I put in there. But it's lighter. You know, pizza dough can be a bit heavy. To the Italians, I'm not talking about Italian pizza, but like the stuff you get from Domino's and Papa John's. They're quite dense sometimes, but that's because it's got a nice open structure. Yes. I'm just going to drizzle some of that melted butter on. That's good. I don't know if I'd detect that it was smoked garlic, but it's definitely got a garlic kick to it. The bread itself is lovely. There's a nice kind of fluffiness to it. So I think that would work well as just a loaf in its own right. This was one of those recipes that was like, oh, it's a great idea, but is it going to translate in reality? Like, is it going to come out as good as I'm hoping it will? It has. Very adaptable. You can put all sorts of different fillings in there. At some point fairly soon, I'm going to do the cinnamon version as well. Might even chuck some pecans in. There's a recipe there for cream cheese icing, that kind of thing. I'll link to it in the description for you. I was dubious about the recipe, I'll be honest, because I wasn't sure if it was going to rise the way I wanted it to. And it's brilliant. You know, it had 30, maybe 40 minutes of proving. And it actually, on that note, it hasn't caused any problems, possibly because I made it, because I flattened everything out. Whereas if I'd over-proved it and then tried to do a loaf, what can happen is you get big cavities, like massive air bubbles form. And then that makes a big gap in the loaf, which if you're trying to do a slice is a problem. Whereas here, it's possibly because I flattened everything out. I bake bread, but I'm by no means a bread baker. I don't, you know, everything I'm saying is a guess. I think realistically, I'm going to end up freezing. I should freeze 6. Whether that happens, I don't know. And then to reheat, I'll either do it in the air fryer, probably 140, 150 for a few minutes, just to, because I don't want to get anything too crunchy. Whereas I think a lower temperature will just warm things through nicely. What I'll also do, I keep seeing this tip on Reddit of reheating pizza in the microwave, and you wet a paper towel, wrap it around the pizza slice, and then microwave it for like a minute or so. Once I've tried it, I'll update the pinned comment and let you know the exact process of what I did. On the scale of how difficult the recipe is, I'm gonna say it's kind of easy to intermediate. Not dead easy, but not super tricky either. The most laborious part is kneading the dough and prepping all of your bits, just chopping it down small. But you know, I didn't do an insane amount of kneading. I injured this hand over 2 months ago and it's still quite bad. So I was a bit, oh, I don't know whether I should be kneading because I don't know if that's a good idea, but I'm actually all right. I'm a bit sore, but I'm usually sore because of various health problems that I have. So it's not made it worse. I split the thing in half, so I probably did 5 minutes on each. If you've got mobility issues, you know, arthritis, any kind of pain issues, or Ehlers-Danlos loss like I've got, if you've got any questions on how you could do something if you've got limited mobility, always feel free to ask down in the comments. I'd mentioned my idea for the savoury buns in a recent Patreon post, so I'm very happy that I can now do a couple of behind the scenes pictures for my community there. Send those tonight before I go to bed. If you want to join up and get some bonus content, behind the scenes, that kind of thing, and any thoughts I've got on recipes for the weeks ahead, I'll leave the link to my Patreon in the description for you. There's different tiers, so choose whatever's affordable for you. It's just a really nice way of supporting your favourite creators financially, emotionally, and just getting that community vibe going on. If you'd like lots more banging breads and all things that make you go, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tap the bell icon if you want to get an alert as soon as I publish a new one. While you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.